If you want to run faster, then you need to improve your acceleration. This is something that's holding back over 90% of athletes is their first 10 to 20 yards, or what people call their acceleration speed. So in this video, I'm going to give you a full guide on how to train acceleration speed, quick first step, explosive start ability, give you exercises for every single drill I explain, and make sure that you leave this video understanding every single thing you need to know to have a fast acceleration. Welcome to the Art of Acceleration. This is a full guide on how to develop acceleration speed for athletes. In this guide, you will learn why acceleration is the most important athletic trait to train, how to train acceleration optimally, no old school, outdated methods, so this is going to be very scientifically based. And third, everything you need to know about the fundamentals of good acceleration and speed training. And why you should listen to me. I've trained Gavin Sure. When he ran with me, he ran 11.2 and 4.8 seconds in a 40-yard dash. And around 8 months of training, TSA is the Speed Academy. So after 8 months of TSA, the Speed Academy, he ran 10.36 FAT in the 100 meter and 4.3 in the 40-yard. In case you want to see a video of Gavin Sure, this is him. I've also trained Jalen Gee. He has started 11.4 100 meter and 4.9 40-yard with me, and then after around a year of training in TSA, which is the Speed Academy, he ran 10.55 100 meter and 4.4 seconds in the 40-yard after about 4 to 8 months or a year of training. This is Jalen running college track and field. I've also trained Division I soccer players, and I help them run faster. So here's just a little exercise. All these guys are Division I athletes in Illinois for soccer. Who even is just Jamari? So why should I be able to talk about this? I've trained 10 guys to run sub-11 in 100 meter. For anyone who doesn't know, sub-11 in the 100 meter is pretty fast. It's usually around sub 4.5 in the 40-yard. And for people who think sub-11 is slow, that's only because you're looking at the Olympic level. Olympic level is top 0.001% of the population. And sub-11, you're already top 5% in the entire world. So yes, you are an elite athlete if you can run, I'd probably say around sub 11.2. I've trained 2 guys who run 10.36 and 10.5 in 100 meter. I actually have another guy who ran 10.2. I just did not put him in this slide, just for personal reasons. Not everyone wants to be shared. I've also trained 30 plus Division I athletes in soccer, football, basketball, track, etc. So multiple sports, even swimming. Yes, a lot of sports. I've trained 10 athletes to go 4.4 or faster in a 40-yard. So that's a pretty fast 40-yard. That's what I looked up is pretty much the standard for fast. It's way faster than the NFL average for every position combined. Trained 3 professional athletes, 2 soccer professional athletes, and 1 basketball professional athlete. So that equals 3. And if you want more proof, right, you want to actually physically see my proof of my results, you can go to justjamari.com to learn more. Just so we understand what this video is going to be like, this is going to be very unedited. I'm going to be giving you pretty much a presentation with a lot of exercises. And if I stutter, whatever it is, it's going to be the most raw version, everything you need to know about acceleration. So let's get into the presentation now that we're ready. Why acceleration is important. Most sports is about who can be in the first steps, who has the best first step possible. Acceleration gets you to the football line. It gets you past the defender for a free layup in basketball. It gets you the 100 meter, 200 meter, and 400 meter win, and is the most exciting factor in good athletes for most sports. Speed is the foundation to change direction, to vertical jump, and to everything that starts with first 2 steps of acceleration speed, right? So here's an example. If you're trying to do a crossover, right, you have Allen Iverson trying to cross over Michael Jordan, you have to push into a step to sell the direction you have to go. That way you can change directions. This is why acceleration is important. If you're not fast and they don't respect you, then you pushing one direction is not going to make them budge so you can get the crossover off. Here in football, this is a wide receiver release stance. And what is this? An acceleration 40-yard 2-point stance, right? You have to be able to explode. You have to be able to sell each direction, be able to change directions quickly. And that all starts with you being able to explode forward to make your defender actually have to guess if you're going to blow past them, or have to respect you if you're going to blow past them or change directions. This is Christian Coleman, the fastest starter probably of all time, and it's just an example of really good acceleration. This is Usain Bolt using sled sprints. I'm going to be talking about resistance sprints a ton in this video. I'll probably eventually talk about the type of resistance you could use if you don't have sled. There is 1,000 variations, but this is Usain Bolt using sled resistance because he needs acceleration, and no, he did not have better acceleration speed. There's 2 types of acceleration. There's early acceleration, which is 0 to 15 yards. Some people might say 0 to 5. I'm perfectly cool with that too. It's pretty much your quick first step, your quickness, your blow by power, your overall power, your explosiveness. That's that look when you are really good in early acceleration. You look quick, you look powerful, you look very explosive. But if you have really good late acceleration, this also looks very quick. This kind of looks like fast feet, really fast turnover. So the feet are cycling through very fast. Usually these people who are good at late acceleration have very pretty form, or they have a good transition phase, which is what you would call it in track and field. This is a good example of early acceleration. Your first 3 steps in acceleration, literally just your first 3 steps, right? Horizontal angles and trying to produce as much horizontal power and explosiveness as possible. And this is a late acceleration. This is more of that turnover speed. So yes, you are still in acceleration angle, but it's not as much power. It's more of that thigh angular velocity. You're trying to cycle through the leg as fast as possible. You're not going to be having low heel recovery or toe dragging around this area of your acceleration. And then we're going to break down how to train it. So these are the main physical qualities, and we'll talk about technical qualities later. But for physical qualities, we have early acceleration, which is sprint variations, horizontal plyometrics, and full range of motion lifting. And there's other ways to train physical qualities that also improve early acceleration and late acceleration, but we're just going to be talking about these for this video. There might be a couple more that I might not state, but it's honestly perfectly okay. You'll get the most gains from this. Late acceleration is going to be specific sprint variations, repeat plyometrics, and elastic-based training. I'm going to cover all 3 of these in early and late acceleration. So early acceleration is all about horizontal force. How much force can you produce in a horizontal angle? So for you guys to understand what horizontal is, horizontal, if you look at my mouse right here, is left to right. Vertical is up to down. You can't perfectly go left to right out the blocks. You can't perfectly go forward, throwing your shoulders, this shoulder cap right here. You can't perfectly throw it forward, but you can perfectly throw it probably around 45 degrees or under. And we're going to talk about technique later, but that is horizontal, right? Anything where we're trying to produce force to move our body forward, and a horizontal angle is probably going to be something called horizontal force. So sprint variations for early acceleration. This is going to be anything that challenges deep angles or high early rate of force development. So that's how fast you could produce a high amount of force in 0.1 to 0.2 seconds. This is probably going to help your early acceleration. So examples would be resisted sprints, 40 to 50% VDEC. So VDEC means velocity decrement. So if you ran at a 20 meter sprint at 3.0 seconds, what percentage, how can we get 40% slower in that 30 meter sprint or that 20 meter sprint? That would be your VDEC, right, in sled resistance. So you can do, there's a bunch of research and calculators you could do, but honestly, it's pretty complicated. I'm not going to explain this video because it'll probably take me 30 minutes. But if you don't want to do that, 50 to 70% of your body weight, some people who are really light can go all the way up to 80% of their body weight. But that will usually get around that 40 to 50% VDEC range. Number 2 is push-ups, sitting, lying flat, or playground style sprint start. So think of a push-up start, laying on your back, laying on your stomach, playground styles where you're doing all these weird positions. People think that's kind of bullshit, but it actually is very effective for improving your early acceleration, so those first 3 steps. Kneeling starts and med ball starts are great for producing force in those deep shin angles like we talked about here, and because there is because we're kneeling on the ground and we have a med ball, or we're trying to produce high force in that first step, we're going to improve early rate of force development in something called electrical mechanical delay, which has high transfer to early acceleration. Heavy banded sprints. So if you don't have a sled, you could do either heavy banded sprints where someone's holding a band around you and doing a lot of tension. You could do hill sprints. You could do med ball sprints. I would not do weighted vest sprints or ankle weight sprints because that's vertical force, right? So that's vertical down. We actually want force that's pulling us backwards horizontally. So back and forward, right? We talked about earlier, that's horizontal. Banded 3 steps are also really good if you have a band. And then if you don't have any type of resistance, these are another very good variation, is 5 to 15 yard, 2-point or 3-point time sprints. So you're trying to sprint as fast as possible by timing your sprints or racing someone, and you either doing a 2-point or a 3-point start for under 20 yards, right? If you go past 20 yards, you're going to be training more late acceleration, but when you're in early acceleration, under 20 yards is going to be some of the best way to stimulate that. So here are exercises. This first exercise, sorry, I don't really know how to do, I've never done a PowerPoint before, right? So here we go. This is a Division I soccer player doing a pretty heavy sled, so that's why he's not moving as fast. Let me actually lower this. So there you go. He's not moving as fast, he's just doing sled sprints. These are push-up starts. So like we talked about earlier, being on the ground, getting comfortable with the ground and deep shin angles, and then trying to sprint for 5 to 10 yards. This is a kneeling start, so I'm literally kneeled down into a half kneeling position, and then I have a really heavy med ball that I have to throw and then get into a sprint. This is one of my fastest athletes. He runs sub 11. He also runs a 4.48 40-yard dash, and he is doing short sprints. So this is 10 to 20 yards. You're sprinting as fast as possible out of 3-point. This is I'm pretty sure, a banded 1-step or banded 3-step projection. So you in a kneeling position, you lean forward, and then you have someone hold a band around you. This is my girlfriend. And then you push as hard as possible horizontally, right? So that horizontal angle. And yes, you're going to fall because you're not going to be used to producing force in that deep angle, but that's what the band is for. So that's all the exercises we explained here. That's all the exercises we explained here for sprint variations. Now we're going to go into horizontal plyometrics. So these are early acceleration-based plyometrics. The goal is to produce high amount of force at fast speeds in a horizontal angle or orientation. There are some exceptions, right? There's stuff like depth jumps and drop jumps that also improve acceleration, and they're more vertical-based plyometrics, but you're going to get a ton of great gains from these type of plyometrics, right? So number one, broad jumps, banded broad jumps, single leg broad jumps. These are big staples for your improvement. Deep tier plyometrics. Think of a heel elevated oscillation deep squat jump, right? So you're honestly doing a jump like a 50 to 70% max height jump, but then you're actually bouncing into that full range of motion like a deep squat. That's pretty counterproductive. Most people think you do jump squats from a core squat position, but this is specifically for early acceleration. I should have a video on that too because it is a little complicated. Single leg bounding and hopping, great. People think that because you're on one leg and you're doing bounds on one leg that it's more transferable to max velocity. But because you're on one leg, it actually takes longer to get off the ground because it's more difficult, right, on the joints. So the ground contact times are going to be slower, which makes it more muscle dominant. And since it's more muscle dominant, it has more transfer to early acceleration and just overall acceleration in general, right? Jumps for distance, thinks bounds or broad jumps for distance where you're actually trying to cover distance. So a lot of people do bounding where they're trying to get up. They're trying to bound up as high as possible. But this, we're actually trying to cover as much distance with every single step. Then we have depth jumps, Viking depth jumps, and depth jumps to broad jumps. So depth jumps, you just drop off the box, you jump as high as possible. Viking depth jumps, you do it with the med ball, and you throw up the med ball on the jump. And then a depth to broad jump would be you drop off the box, and then you try to jump as far as possible. And then some exceptions would be stuff like resisted jumps, depth jumps, and non-counter movement movements. I said that twice, right? That's pretty dumb, isn't it? Non-counter movement jumps, so where you're pausing for 3 to 4 seconds, and then you're trying to improve a lot of rate force development after pausing, right? So there's a lot of impulse-based exercises. That's honestly, most of these exercises are very heavy on impulse, right? So impulse is producing force in a time frame, high amount of force in a time frame. So here's an example of a broad jump. This should be a triple broad jump, right? So this will have really high transfer to late acceleration, but also early acceleration. Here's another example of a standing quintuple jump. So this is bounding for distance, where you're jumping off one leg and covering distance, very similar to a broad jump, but then you're landing and then measuring it and trying to repeat that. Then we have single leg hopping. You see how it's more difficult on the body. So it's actually spending more time on the ground. It might be more like 0.15 to 0.25 seconds on the ground. Usually sprinting is 0.1 to 0.8 to 0.08 to 0.15, but this is going to be a little bit longer, which is going to be more of that acceleration speed. This is a depth jump. Oh, shit. What did I just do? So that's a single leg hop or a single leg bound. This is a depth jump, so we're trying to go for max height. I didn't really jump that high. It was just more of a demonstration. But yeah, that's a depth jump. And then this is like a deep tier plyometric where we're going to a full range of motion. And you don't really have to call it plyometric, but still, you're jumping, right? So in a full range of motion and just kind of oscillating through that range of motion that you're being given, right? Now that we covered early acceleration plyometric exercises, let's talk about lifting. How do we lift for early acceleration? First 5 steps. The goal is to develop strength on a single leg mainly. Sprinting is always on one leg. We have to remember that. So overcoming or yielding isometrics have huge transfer to your first 5 yards and rate of force development / strength. This is a study that was done by Cal Dietz, I believe, where he tested isometric training, eccentric training, and concentric training. Most people would think that your first 5 steps is purely concentric, but actually your isometric strength had a high transfer to your first 5 yards, right? So check that out. See if you need more isometric strength in your training to improve your first 5 yards. Then rear foot elevated split squat is the #1 lift for acceleration and overall speed. It's glute dominant. It's on one leg. You can overload it. There's just so many benefits. It's joint angle specific. You can make it velocity specific. You can make it quarter squat, half squat, full range of motion, extreme ranges of motion, right? It's just the best lift. It's hard for me to change my mind. That is in my opinion. If you think it's something else, whatever, right? Heel elevated front squat or goblet squat or heel elevated back squat. I would not do a regular back squat for athletes. I would do heel elevated always. And in general, I would kind of skip the back squat for a goblet squat or a rear foot elevated. Those are my two favorite. And this is for general strength, so don't look for transfer here. This is just for beginners who need it, right? Trap bar deadlift or half squats, pause squats or high pulls. This improves explosive strength. This improves something called impulse, right? We're trying to produce force in a specific time frame that is high amount or rate of force development. All of these is where you're pausing and then you're trying to produce high amount of force, drive the bar as fast as possible, and we're going to improve our speed generally, right? It's not going to have direct transfer, but it will help aspects of our speed training outside of just sprinting alone, right? Seated calf raise and single leg calf raise, lower limb strength. There is some studies, I don't know how accurate it is, but I have been looking into it recently, that your first 5 yards has hip power and plantar flexion power, right? So how strong your calves are and how strong your hips are, your glutes and hamstrings and quads and everything, right? And 61% in some of these researches, right? You don't have to take my word for it, but 61% of your first 5 yard speed, so how fast you can cover first 5 yards, has to do with plantar flexion power. So how strong your calves are. That's seated calf raise, that's single leg calf raise, and that's plyometrics. I'm just saying, hey, look into it. Overcoming calf isometrics are also pretty good for that too. Look into it. I just learned about this recently, and I just wanted to.
Squeeze it.
Even if that isn't true, the calves are still really important. But 61% is a big amount. So if you have weak calves, that might be a big reason why your acceleration is slow.
Right here, squeeze it.
Here is a glute dominant lift. This is the overcoming glute isometric, where you're trying to push as hard as possible into something. This is a rear foot elevated split squat. Usually you would have like not the toes bent, and you would have it like under one of those type of like, I don't even know what they're called, but pretty much like a rear foot elevated pad. And then you would go through a bigger range of motion, like what I'm doing right, not what I'm doing right here, but this is very similar. Even a split squat works too if you can't do a rear foot elevated. But yeah, pushing heavy weight. I think this right here is around 275, right? So boom, maybe 250, I don't know. Trap bar deadlift, not a lot of weight, but still producing force. So you see where I'm at in this position. This is a half squat position. Very similar to acceleration, early acceleration specifically, right? Then we have single leg calf raise. You can do barbell, dumbbell, Smith machine, whatever feels safest to you. Usually I like to put one leg onto like some type of step so you have more stability. Our goal is not to train force production with stability. In the research, when you have less stability, you produce less force because your brain does not feel safe. Your brain needs to feel safe, so that means we do our stability exercises on the side and our force production exercises on the side. We do not combine force production and stability ever, right? Do you do your sprint training on a Bosu ball? No. There's a reason why you don't do that. You do sprint training on flat grass, on a track, so you can get as fast as possible. That's what all the best coaches say. There's a reason for that. Is because we want stability, right? Now, sprint variations for late acceleration. The goal here is 45-degree angles and try to hold that angle for as long as possible, because after the first 5 steps, a lot of people like to stand straight up. But if we can hold that 45-degree angle for 10 to 20 yards, we're probably going to be faster. Then we want lighter loads and higher peak powers, right? So we hit peak power when we do our really heavy sleds, that 40 to 50% VDEC. That is the best way to train optimal power. I didn't mention that earlier. If you want to train power, which is strength stimulus, right? Remember, power is also strength. It's not velocities. You're not going to have direct impact to speed. But if you want to train optimal power, then higher peak powers would be with 40, 50%. But if we want more speed strength stimulus, then 20 to 30% VDEC or 25 to 50% body weight resistant sleds are going to be the best thing. So this is usually where this is the money, right? This is what all the track coaches say. You go either 10 to 20% or 25 to 30%. You never go above 40, right? That's the thing you've always heard. This is that fundamental, right? You're always going to hear this. You're always going to see this. 25 to 40-ish% body weight or 20 to 30% VDEC. It's going to be really good for just sprints on speed strength, or you want higher transfer to your sprint speed. 2 or 3 point starts for 20 to 30 yards. So yes, we're trying to lengthen the distance, sprint a little bit farther out. Drop in sprint, so that's kind of like a jog into a sprint for 10 to 30 yards. 10-yard fly sprints can also help late acceleration. People think that max velocity improvement only improves max velocity. No, you do have some that carry over into acceleration as well, but also acceleration sets up your max velocity, so it's kind of like a little mixture, right? Light to medium banded sprints, parachutes, hill sprints, anything resistance. Now, if we can not do parachutes, that'd be awesome, right? But if you have no form of resistance, you have no hill, no one can hold a band around you, you have no way to get a sled, you can't put books into your backpack or water into your backpack and then put some type of thing to wrap around your hip, like you can't figure out anything and all you have is a parachute, then fine. But parachutes is probably the worst way of resistance in general, right? I don't recommend it, but if you have no choice, then I guess I do recommend it, whatever, right? But please look into other ways. There are thousands of ways to do a resistance sled, usually with backpacks. I've seen a lot of really creative ways with backpacks. So here's a resistance sled sprint. This is a little bit lighter now. I think this is probably 40% of my body weight. So there you go, right? Then this is Gavin Schur. This is a 10.36 athlete that I've been working with. I took him from 11.2 to 10.36. He also endorses it. So yes, you can look him up and you probably would say the same thing. And this is him running a 4.3 40 yard. Really fast. There's no one of my athletes who went from, I'm pretty sure he went from like a 12.2 to 11.2. So he made amazing progress. He's doing a flying 10, right? So before, like we said, one of the exercises was a 30-yard sprint or 40-yard sprint, so a little bit further out acceleration sprints. And then this is a flying 10, so another way to improve acceleration. This is me doing a flying 10. This should be sub 1 here. And then this is me doing heavy sled sprints, so a little bit heavier, around probably about 50% body weight. Maybe earlier in that video what I was showing you over here was probably about 25% of my body weight. All right, now let's talk about repeat plyometrics for late acceleration. The goal is to challenge the stretch shortening cycle and produce high force. So we need to be able to accept force at fast speeds and produce high force at fast speeds for late acceleration. It's not the same thing as max velocity, right? So this is going to be triple broad jumps, standing quintuple jumps, banded triple broad jumps, high intent bounds, straight leg bounds, speed bounding, light resisted bounds, repeated jumps, pogo, squat jumps, resisted pogos, jumps, band assisted jumps, drop jumps, speed def jumps to targets. All this type of stuff is repeat jumps, repeat horizontal jumping, repeat vertical jumping, repeat single leg jumping, bounding, repeats, right? Remember the word repeat, plyometrics, for distance, for height, for a lot of different type of things. So I'm not going to over explain it. Let's get straight into the videos, right? So here is a broad jump for distance. We're doing that triple, trying to jump as far as possible. The repeat section challenges the stretch shortening cycle more. This is the standing quintuple jump. So we also talked about this in early acceleration, but this is more of a late acceleration exercise. So yeah, we're trying to challenge stretch shortening cycle by doing it in a repeat fashion. Now this is a straight leg bound. I wish I could show you from the side because it'd be a way better, but we're trying to bounce off the ankle, right? Plantar flexion. This is a hurdle hop, one of the best plyometrics for max velocity and late acceleration, right? Here's a different version. So we're gonna pop off this box and do a drop jump, and then pop back onto another box and do another drop jump into a repeat jump, right? So very, very intense, but is one of the best things to challenge stretch shortening cycle. Then we have resisted pogos, right? So this is 10 to 20% of your body weight, trying to jump as high as possible from the ankle mainly, no quad if possible, or not a lot of quad, right? Then we have assisted jumps. This isn't the best setup because the bar is too low, but you can hold onto a wall or do banded and just try to jump as high as possible while deloading your body weight about 20 to 50%. Then this is another drop jump variation. Now let's talk about elastic-based lifting. I made up this term to categorize my lifting, but I promise you it's not anything special or any type of gimmick tricks. The goal is to lift for power, joint angle specific, rate of force development, and early rate of force development, right? So for late acceleration, this is more power oriented. We're gonna be doing 40 to 60% body weight speed lifts. This is stuff like speed trap bar deadlifts, speed squats, speed split squats, or speed rear foot elevated squats. Then there's stuff like oscillation lifts. So we're doing rear foot elevated oscillations or front foot elevated oscillations or even oscillations of the calf. I'll show a video demonstration of all that. Heavy lifting for 0.8 meters per second or 0.6 seconds on the concentric. So there's eccentric where you're moving down and then concentric is moving up. We're trying to go for that 0.6 seconds on the concentric, or if you have a velocity-based tracker, you do 0.8 meters per second. A little bit faster would be not to be too bad either. So if you can go 0.8 to 1.2 meters per second around that range, I actually prefer 1.0 to 1.2, but if you're trying to get a little more strength, then you could go 0.8. 0.8, and the lower you go is the heavier. Barbell step-ups, rear foot elevated, split squats, heavy quarter squats, heavy single leg quarter squats, single leg calf raises, right? So here's some examples. We have a speed banded half squat. This is probably about 40% of my body weight with bands to have higher stress on the eccentric, so a fast eccentric. This is going to overload something called the amortization phase of the stretch shortening cycle, and you're trying to teach your body how to reverse out of that as fast as possible. There's a trap bar deadlift. This is that 0.8 meters per second, 0.6 second type of lift, where the concentric is about 0.6 seconds. You're trying to lift as fast as possible, right? I'll let you watch it all the way through because I'm talking a lot. All right, lifting as fast as possible, powering through that triple extension. This is a quarter squat rear foot elevated, right? going a little bit heavier than usual. Then a barbell step up. You can go a lot heavier than this, but usually about 40-60% of your body weight for this as well. It works well. This is a quarter squat. You wouldn't believe me, but if I showed a different angle, this is actually 3 plates. So I'm doing 3 plates on a single leg rear foot elevated quarter squat. The peak forces eccentrically and concentrically are higher than what you would actually get in the max effort vertical jump and can match what you're doing in sprinting. So in the weight room, we're actually trying to either match or overload peak forces that we would see in our sport or the goal that we want. So if our goal is to sprint faster, if we're doing lifts that don't hit peak forces that are higher than what we're doing in sprinting, then we're not really training force production. We're kind of just wasting time. There's actually research that shows the peak forces in hang cleans, power cleans, and even high pulls, and they actually don't even match up to how much peak force you can get on one leg in a rear foot elevated quarter squat with a Smith machine because you need more stability, right? So I'm not going to go too deep into that whole peak force conversation, but if you want to look into it, that is another aspect that is really important. This is how to train acceleration part 2, the technique portion. Now we'll talk to you about the technical side of acceleration. This will be short, but we will cover the angles we want and the simple drills to train them. So what do we want in acceleration? This is generally what we want for acceleration speed. Projection, so that's 45-degree angles or below. Some athletes in track and field can do 35 degrees, but usually about that 45 to 40-degree angle. Parallel shin, so that's straight lines from the shin and the back leg and torso on top of that. Low heel recovery in the first 2 to 3 steps. I'm not going to overemphasize this. We don't want a bunch of toe drags, but around that low heel recovery would be pretty good. Driving the feet down and back in the first 3 steps, and then purely down in steps 3 and above. So this is also going to be deep shin angles, and that means if you get deep shin angles, that means you're pushing hard and you have an ankle rocker from mid stance to late stance. So we want to be able to rock our ankle forward to get those deep shin angles, which also is how you push. And then switching leg actions. We want our legs to be switching every single step we take. So this is just a good example of some decent start mechanics. 45-degree angle, if you look at this arrow right here, we get triple extension. We don't need full triple extension. I will cover it or I might not cover it, but the whole triple extension debate is starting to kind of go up and down. You don't need full triple extension because usually that puts you in displacement. So you would overextend usually, and then you would have to recover your foot, which would spend more time on the ground. So somewhere close to triple extension is good. Low heel recovery, so foot is lowest to the ground as possible without doing a toe drag. Positive shin angles, so parallel shins. Look how this shin is this direction, and also this shin is very close. And then also the torso is pretty close to matching this foot, right? So let's talk about drills for projection. We want to throw your shoulders forward and maintain a horizontal angle, and here's how we're going to do this, right? We have kneeling sprints, so we're in that kneeling position. Push-up sprints, so we're in these deep positions. You have stuff like shoulder hardness resistance sprints, especially for heavy sleds. So you put around that shoulder and then throw your hips or your shoulder as horizontal as possible. You will get deeper angles if you train it over time. Broad jump variations and the 7-cone drill or the arm Superman drill or wall drills are okay. They're not perfect, but they do help. Let's look at them. Division I athlete doing push-up sprints, right? Getting really used to those deep positions. Then we have heavy resistance sprints around the shoulder. So we've seen this video a couple times, but look, we have that shoulder resistance, right? Teaching our body to get that 45-degree angle. Now we have broad jumps. We've seen this again. Single broad jumps this time. And then this is 7-cone drill. You can look this up. This is on the Speed Academy. We have a chart if you join the Speed Academy, and it will show you cones on what step you need to hit on every step to run a specific 40-yard dash time, which also you can kind of transfer that over to your 100-meter. So let's talk about drills for low heel recovery. We want a piston action, and this is going to be more of a sweeping action. And we want to avoid cycling the leg in the first few steps. This is mainly going to be coming from you pushing off your back leg. If you don't push off your back leg, you're going to probably cycle the first few steps. When you've pushed really hard from the back leg and from the hip, you will probably get a good cycling action, or you probably avoid the cycling action and get that piston action. But still, there's some drills to help kind of emphasize that anyways, right? 5-yard time sprints, kneeling med ball sprints, 5-yard 3-point starts. So the short sprints, heavy sled sprints, 40 to 50% VDEC, which is that optimal power range, or 50 to even 80% of your body weight. 4 and 7-cone drills. So that's that drill we talked about that we have in the Speed Academy. Wall drills can help, not the best, but they can help. Banded marches, banded bounds, banded march bound runs. That's also a good drill where you either put it around the waist or the hips. You can do this with sled, and you either march, you do bounds, or you do all 3 in together, which is a combo drill. So very similar to the drill that we've seen earlier, kneeling med ball sprint, and then we sprint as fast as possible for 5 yards. Then we have the heavy sled. So this is 40% VDEC. So that's probably what, 50% of my body weight, close to 50%, probably about more like 46%. This is a wall drill. So this is an isometric hold in that 45-degree angle, which also can teach you low heel recovery, because if you can hit the 45-degree angle, then you will hit low heel recovery. This is a little quick rant, is that all the drills you've seen in this technical side have also been in the physical side, right? So we talked about physical aspects, and it's the same drills as the technical aspects, because technique usually comes from structure, right? So we want to improve the physical capabilities, and our technique will kind of improve itself, especially if we have a little bit of focus on very small details that we don't need to overemphasize and spend too much time on. So I'll probably talk more about that later, but that's just a little nitbit. The goal for drills for leg action, right? The goal, pretty much land under your center mass, right? And either center mass or a little bit forward. As long as we're not loading in front of our center mass, which means we're casting out, we can land a little bit in front, but we shouldn't be loading in front of our center mass. When we load, we should be pretty much directly under our center mass. But on touchdown, some people just can't hit it, right? You can hit it usually, but some people might hit directly in front or a little bit in front. As long as it's not too much, you're not casting, you're probably going to be okay. So stuff like switches, triple switches, bounds, resisted A marches, resisted A bounds, resisted switches, resisted sprints, 20 to 25 to 70% body weight will teach this. It's a big range, because honestly, anything that's a good resistance will probably teach this. Time sprints that are short, so under 40 yards. Wicked sprints can even teach leg action, so teach the ability to switch, which can transfer over to acceleration, even though it's more of a max velocity drill, and then 4 and 7 cone drills, right? So here's a switch. This is a triple switch, so we're trying to switch the leg and the bottom leg at the same time. A good little tip is to switch this bottom leg first, and then that leg will come also with it. I don't know why I let this roll for so long, but yeah, that's triple switch. This is a single switch, so bottom leg comes up early, and then we swap at the same time. So there's a swap, exchange, right? Something of that nature will help you ton. This is a march. And when I say resisted, all you do is just put a sled behind you or a band. Same stuff, right? Nothing too complicated. You just do a band, and that's a wicked sprint. So that will really get you that thigh angular velocity development, and also teach you how to switch, right? I kind of look kind of decently fast in that video. Let's look. It's kind of fast. I don't know. I'm just saying, right? Okay, so here are extra notes for acceleration technique. This stuff didn't make the cut, but here's some extra tips. I've talked about some of this already, but 61% of your first step comes from plantar flexion power. This is calf power. You want your hips to pass the knee or be above the knee before your back leg extends or gets off the block pad. So if you're on, especially if you're doing block start in track and field, you want your hip to be above the front knee, so the front leg that's up. You want your hip to extend over the front that knee before your back foot comes off the pad. If your back foot comes off the pad, that means you pushed off your front leg, not your back leg. And we need delayed knee extension, which is a lot of it's pushing off the back leg and extending from the hip first before getting knee extension, right? So if that's too complicated, just push off your back leg and push with your hips as much as possible without overextending that lower back. The simplest way to fix 90% of people's starts is focusing on pushing off the back leg. This stops people from standing up in the first few steps. I just said this already. Push off your back leg. If you figure out ways, there's so many drills for it. Resistance sprints helps, time sprints helps. I can't hold your hand on it. You just have to have a focus for it. You cannot only put all the pressure into your front leg. Your adductors, your inside groin, and your abductors, your outside, are the key muscles to drive your leg down. So this is in thigh angular velocity. If you struggle with the attack and push portion, right? So there's early flexion, there's late flexion, there's attack, which is driving from hip flexion, driving the leg down, and then there's push. So that's plantar flexing and hip extending when your foot's touching the ground. If you struggle with that, then you might have a weakness in the adductors and abductors, right? So if you want a better attack and push, right? That push power, that attack power, that punch power, that probably is going to be coming from these groin and outer glute areas, right? So part 3, everything you need to know about acceleration. Here I'll just give you some extra info and important points for your training, right? So this isn't anything that's specific. It's a lot more like, think of it as the miscellaneous area, right? It's just gonna give you a lot of tips that you'll probably hear in all my videos, but I'm just gonna kind of throw them all out here so you just know a lot, right? Speed is power, the simple formula. If you want to increase your speed, you need to increase horizontal power. Sprinting, even in upright sprinting, you're not producing force down only down. You're producing force down and back, right? So that's horizontal force production, which is horizontal power. And here are 3 ways to improve power. Increase horizontal force / peak power. So that's that 40 to 50% VDEC or 50 to 80% body weight sled sprints. Increase speed strength or increase velocity. You can do this with resistance sprints. You can do this with plyometrics. You can do this with just body weight time sprints, right? The good old fashioned stuff, or racing sprints. But that is the simple formula for power. I have a full video on power itself that breaks down these 3 tips. The number one key for increasing horizontal force is peak power. The easiest way to increase horizontal force is resistance sprints. You do 50 to 60%, or it should be 40 to 50%. This might be a typo. VDEC in the research is the best way to improve horizontal force and overload peak power. Remember, we're just trying to hit forces that we can't normally hit in bodyweight sprints, because you actually only get, I believe it's 0.3 seconds of peak power in a regular sprint, an intermediate to novice athlete. So beginner to intermediate athletes only get peak power in under a second. So if you're not an advanced athlete, you're not training peak power by just sprinting, right? The only way you can overload it is by doing some type of resistance sprint with sleds or even hills, right? Or banded stuff. 50 to 70% of your body weight loaded sprints. So like I said, I kind of messed up some of this typing. It can be 40 to 60% VDEC or 50 to 80% body weight, just heads up. If you can't do this, then do hill sprints, parachute sprints. Once again, I don't recommend this. Or heavy banded sprints can also work. Not the best stimulus, but can work. Here is Jalen G. He went from a 4.8 to a 4.4 second 40-yard doing TSA, which is the Speed Academy, doing sled sprints from the Speed Academy. I program sled sprints, plyometrics, and strength training all into one workout. I do 3 workouts a week. Actually, it's 5 workouts, lower body, upper body. And then we progress that for months and months and months for 12 months straight. That's the Speed Academy. And he went from a 4.8 to a 4.4 doing that speed program. The number one key to increasing speed strength is very simple. It has high transfer to your speed and acceleration. It's speed strength. So that is really important. You need speed strength. Everyone needs speed strength. That is the golden metric for speed training, if that makes sense. So 15 to 30% VDEC or 15 to 40% body weight sprints, sled sprints, will be optimal for developing speed strength. And in lifting, you should be doing 40 to 60% of your body weight in squat and deadlift variations, even calf raise variations. There's obviously 1,000 different variations or ways to train speed strength, like Olympic lifting variations. But either way, general recommendations for increasing speed strength is going to be the highest transfer you have to your sprint speed, right? You will see this tomorrow. You'll see this instantly, almost, in a sense, once you adapt to the stimulus. This type of sled sprint should be trained 1 to 2 times per week. This athlete went from 11.2 to 10.8 in the 100 meter and ran 4.48 seconds in 40-yard with the Speed Academy, focusing on mainly speed strength. So when we hit the phase of speed strength, I believe that's phase 4 through 6, we focused on speed strength mainly in phase 4 through 6 of the Speed Academy, and he ended up running a 10.8 in an actual meet, and then he also ran a 4.48 in the 40-yard, right? So pretty fast guy, really consistent, and I'm very proud of him. And he did that with the Speed Academy. The number one key to velocity, there are 2 simple ways to train velocity. Flying 10s are some of the best ways to train and improve upright sprint speed, which is max velocity. And second place is the 40-yard time sprints. If you do this and you're timing or racing someone often with high rests, you will just get faster. This is the highest transfer to your sprint speed. There is no amount of loading that will have direct transfer, completely direct improvement to your speed besides max velocity sprint training. You're also going to improve your reactive strength index, which hopefully I talk about in this thing, but either way, your RSI is really important for your sprint speed. So yes, flying 10s, flying 20s, flying 30s, low sets, low reps. You're not doing 10 reps. You're doing 2 to 4 reps, even 2 to 6 reps at most of 40-yard sprints or flying 10s, and that will be the best way to improve velocity. There is no other way, all right? I'm sorry. If you think that's a hot take, you just need to learn more about sprint training. There simply is not a better way to improve max velocity over some of these variations. Also, don't underestimate or underrate 10 to 15% body weight sprints. This is very popular by the LSU track team, which is a Division I team that only does 10 to 20% body weight sprints. I don't even think they go above 10%. So you go very, very light. That's 5 to 15 pounds usually. And you usually do this about 1 to 2 times per week. This is Gavin. He went from 11.26 to 10.36 in the 100 meter and I think he ran a 4.8 with me, and then eventually ran a 4.36 in a 40-yard doing the Speed Academy flying 30-yard sprint drill. So in the Speed Academy, eventually we built up to flying 30 sprints, And once I had him on these, he ended up running 10.36. And obviously he improved over the year, but this is one of the highest stimulus exercises I had him do, right? And he's obviously one of the fastest people in the world doing that, right? There's not a lot of people in the world you'll find that can run under 10.5. Another tip, to get fast, you need to sprint. At the end of the day, if you're complaining that you're not fast, you're not sprinting 1 to 2 times per week, you can't complain why you're not fast. In the Speed Academy, we actually sprint 2 to 3 times per week, but you need to get faster by sprinting and racing people and timing yourself. If you're sprinting and you're just focusing on your technique and you're not actually clearing your mind and timing yourself and trying to improve that time, and you're not trying to race someone, then you're not going to get faster. And here's another tip. The second you hit a PR in a sprint practice, you improve. Even if it's 0.01 seconds, the workout is done. You gain nothing, literally nothing from doing more sets, right? You're only having the risk of fatigue and the risk of injury, right? And we don't want fatigue. We want to be as fresh as possible. This is not a cardio game. This is not an endurance game. When we're trying to improve raw speed, it is purely peak outputs, and then we stop, and then we rest a lot, and then we repeat it again. It's very boring, and we are not going to go past the PR. Maybe you could do your plyometrics and lifting, but let's say you have 6 sets of 20-yard sprints, and you time your 20-yard sprint, and you PR by you go from a 2.6 to a 2.58, you're done. The practice is done. You've gotten what you wanted. Go ahead and do your plyometrics and your lifting and leave, or just go home, right? You do not want to push past your PRs. That is the best way to make sure that you're not getting overly fatigued for your sprint training. If you want to be fast, you have to do fast stuff. So if you want to be fast, a huge key is max intent, which means we need to be sprinting above 95% max intensity or outputs, right? So we have a specific output that our body can produce. And if we're sprinting under 95% of our max output, so what our body can produce, then we're actually improving endurance in its conditioning. It's not a stimulus to the central nervous system, which is how you get faster. So we need the stimulus, and actually it should be 97%, but 95% is also a good rule of thumb. But usually you don't want to be 3% slower than usual. So that's why you want to test in your warm-up, maybe a 10-yard sprint or a 20-yard sprint in your warm-up, somewhere in the warm-up, to see, hey, am I way off? Am I 10% slower than usual? Maybe I didn't sleep well or I didn't eat well. And if you're above 5% slower than usual, then you shouldn't be working out. You're just conditioning. You're not actually going to gain anything from sprinting. You're just going to be doing cardio or conditioning or aerobic training, even if it does have high intent, if that output is under 5%, right? So if it's 5% slower, you're done with working out. And when it comes to lifting, if you lift more than you're sprinting, you're not going to get faster, right? So if you're lifting literally more volume than you're sprinting, don't expect to get faster, right? Speed increases strength, but strength does not always increase speed. My rule of thumb, this is a big hot take, but at the end of the day, I have great results, so you can take it for what you will, is I do 80% plyometric training, which includes sprinting, and 20% strength training. And some of my top athletes, they're doing 90% plyometric and elastic-based training and 10% strength training. Now, I'm not going to lie, there is some athletes who are very muscle dominant, and you know who you are because it's very obvious, and they need, maybe 40 to 50% strength training, but I almost never touch that. It's always going to be 80 to 90% speed and plyometric and elastic-based training, and then maybe 10 to 20% strength training. So that's 1 to 2 sets or 1 to 4 sets, 1 to 2 times per week of a squat and a hinge and a calf raise. That's it. It's not that much volume, and you don't need that much if you're trying to get faster. You need to rest as hard as you train. So if you're sprinting, the goal is always quality, is never conditioning for speed. If the goal is speed, is not endurance, is not trying to sprint for long distances, it means you need to be sprinting under 60 yards usually, because the second you sprint for over 6 seconds in the research, that's not anaerobic anymore, it's aerobic, or it's anaerobic endurance. So it's not anaerobic power if you sprint for over 6.0 seconds, which means we need to be sprinting under 60 yards, because I promise you, 99% of you cannot run a 6-second flat 60-yard sprint. 90% of you guys probably, all right, unless you're probably a low 10 sprinter or a sub 10 sprinter. So that's yards. In meters, none of you guys are. I don't think anyone's broken 6 seconds in the 60-meter dash. So for my rule of thumb is that we keep it under 40 yards. So either 40 yards or under. The max we'll go out on a max velocity day would be a 40-yard sprint, but after that, most people can run 40 yards in under 6 seconds, which would be a good stimulus for speed. But the second anything goes above 6 seconds in total max effort sprinting, it's just conditioning. And then for every 10 yards, we usually want to rest about a minute per 10 yards of sprint distance. So how hard we sprint, if we're doing 6 times 20, that means we're doing 2-minute rest between each set of that max effort sprint. In between every sprint session, we need a minimum of 24 hours of rest or a maximum of 48 to 72 hours, right? So a basic template would be sprint Monday, rest Tuesday, sprint Wednesday, rest Thursday, sprint Friday, and then rest 2 days. Or what I do with a lot of people is sprint Monday, rest Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, which is 72 hours, and then sprint Friday. And rest day means rest. No conditioning, no technique work. You could probably do some upper body or core work or maybe some ankle work, but that's it. We're not sprinting or doing a bunch of tempo work or conditioning. We are just resting, right? You want to run 6 miles on your off day so you can lose weight and then expect to get faster? That's competing demands. It's called adaptive gains, I believe, or adaptive stimulus. If you have too many different stimulus, you can't adapt to everything, okay? So we need to adapt to speed. Fat does not fly. Most athletes cannot be fast and also have a high body fat percentage. You might have fast acceleration, but you will not be fast in total if you have a lot of body fat percentage or if you don't have a lot of mass-specific force or muscle, right? So you don't have sport-specific muscle or mass-specific force, then there you go, right? And I might be saying the term wrong. I'm really tired at this point, so I don't even know what I'm saying at this point. But either way, if you have too much mass, right, even if it is all muscle, there's a certain point where there's just too much muscle, right? In the research, for every 1% of your body weight gain, that is 0.1 seconds on your time and vice versa. So that's 0.1 seconds off your time or 0.1 second on your time. This is pretty bad, and yes, there is some exceptions. There's also another research that states that for every 3.4 pounds of fat, that is, I believe it was 0.24 seconds on your time, either gained or taken away. 3.4 pounds of fat. Dude, you gain 4 pounds of fat and you get 2.5 seconds slower. That's insane, right? So you need to keep your fat off your body. Don't put on too much muscle mass. We want to keep our mass as specific as possible to sprinting. A good rule of thumb is just to stay between 10 to 15%, but the elite athletes are 8 to 10%. I don't think you can stay 8% year round. It depends on your body type, so this isn't nutritional advice, but find out what works best for you, and you just need to be under 14% if possible. But with 50%, some people get away with it. Strong plantar flexion equals fast acceleration. Earlier I mentioned 61% of your first step speed comes from the calf. That means we need to train two things, strength and impulse. Easy ways to train calf strength is single leg calf raise, soleus raise, and overcoming ankle isometrics. This is probably the number one exercise. And then easy impulse focused exercises would be light or medium resisted sprints, resisted bounds, resisted pogos, bounding, single leg hops, and hurdle hops, which I showed exercises of all those, I'm pretty sure. Maybe not the resisted bounding, I think, but we should have shown all that sometime today. RSI is low. That means you'll be slow, right? So RSI is simply important. If your ankle is stiff while you're sprinting, then you're just going to be slow. If you get a 2.5 to 3.0 RSI, you'll probably be fine. But if you're below 2.0, then you need extensive plyometrics and calf strength training, especially in the soleus, at least 2 to 3 times per week. And if you're in around the 3.0 or above range, then high intensity plyometrics will give you the most benefits. If you're under 2.5 RSI, you should not be doing high intent plyometrics. So that's bounding, hurdle hops, sprinting, stuff like that. You can sprint because you need to sprint either way. But if you're above 2.5, then yes, you can do the intent stuff. But below that, you'll probably just get injuries or you're not going to get the gains because the ground contact times are going to be too slow, right? So you need stiff ankles, and this is a simple way to get it. So get faster the easy way. If you want me to do all this programming and all these exercises, put it all together for you on an online speed training program, I have something called the Speed Academy, or some people call it TSA. It is a 12-month speed program that increases your speed every single month, and it's progressed workouts, reps, and sets, strength training, and plyometric training, everything you need to get faster. And if you don't increase your speed by 0.2 to 1.0 seconds in 1 to 6 months, I'll literally give your money back, right? You just email me. No risk at all. I'll just give you your money back. So click the link in the description and the pinned comment to join the Speed Academy today. If you keep looking, I probably have a little discount code for you if you want to join the Speed Academy for your first month.